The desert was a place that tested the will of every soul who dared to live on its edge. In the dry basin of New Mexico Territory, 1876, the days were long, the nights cold, and the land unforgiving. Most folks who carved out lives here did so with grit and stubbornness, clinging to ranches, cattle herds, and the thin promise of prosperity. But for Clara Whitmore, the frontier was more than survival. It was freedom. Clara was 22, the daughter of a modest rancher who owned more debts than cattle. She had inherited her late mother's independent streak, and that made her something of an oddity in town. While other young women stitched quilts and dreamed of marriage, Clara roamed the hills on horseback, gathered herbs, and sketched the landscapes in a worn notebook. She was no stranger to whispers behind her back. Wild, strange, unmarriageable. But she bore them with a quiet defiance. She would not be caged, not by expectations or by men. One late afternoon in July, Clara rode farther than usual, chasing the horizon until the sun sank into a wash of gold and crimson. The desert was alive with shadows, coyotes calling in the distance. As she guided her horse toward a creek she noticed something unusual, buzzards circling low. Curiosity, sharp as always, drove her forward. That was when she found him. Lying near the bank, half buried in dust and blood, was a man. His horse, a proud sorrel, lay dead a few yards away, the saddle stripped. The man's shirt was soaked crimson and his breath came shallow, ragged. Clara slid from her saddle, heart pounding. He wasn't just any man. His features, bronze skin, strong jaw, black hair falling over his face, marked him as Apache. Every warning she'd heard in town rang in her ears. Savages, raiders, dangerous. Yet here he was, not a threat but a dying man. His hand twitched weakly toward a knife at his side when she approached, but his strength failed him. Clara knelt, her hands steady even as her thoughts raced. His wounds were bullet holes, at least 2 in the side, one grazing his shoulder. Whoever had shot him hadn't cared to finish the job. "Don't move," she whispered, pressing a cloth torn from her skirt against the bleeding wound. "I won't harm you." His dark eyes flickered open, defiance and pain mingling in them. He studied her face as though weighing her soul. "Why?" he rasped. Clara swallowed. Why indeed? If anyone saw her here helping him, she could be ruined. Yet she couldn't walk away. Perhaps it was her stubborn compassion, or perhaps the desert had whispered this into being. "Because you'll die if I don't." She managed to get him onto her horse with no small effort, then led them to a cave she sometimes used as shelter during long rides. There she cleaned his wounds with herbs, stitched what she could, and gave him water. For days, Clara returned in secret, bringing bread and broth, sitting by his side as he healed. It was in those days she learned his name, Kai, which meant willow in his people's tongue. He was not a raider, as the townsfolk would have believed, but a rancher of his own. His family had once held wide lands, but encroaching cattle barons and relentless prejudice had stolen most of it. He fought to keep what little remained, always hunted, always judged. The men who shot him were thieves who wanted his herd and knew no one would protect an Apache rancher's rights. Clara listened, her heart aching. She saw in him not an enemy, but a mirror of herself, someone fighting against cages the world tried to put around them. And yet she also sensed his despair. Late one night, under the wavering glow of a fire, Kai admitted in a low voice, "I am the last of my line. My brothers are dead. My parents gone. I have no wife, no children. When I die, everything dies with me." The weight of those words hung heavy in the cave. Clara watched him, his face illuminated by firelight, his eyes hollow with grief. Something inside her stirred. An impulse reckless, wild, but undeniable. She leaned forward, her voice trembling with conviction. "Then you will not die without a legacy. I swear it." He frowned, not understanding. "I will carry your child," she said. The words tasted strange in her mouth, yet once spoken they rang with truth. "Your bloodline won't end here. I'll see that your people live on through me, through us." For a moment silence filled the cave, broken only by the crackle of fire and the distant howl of coyotes. Kai stared at her, stunned, torn between disbelief and awe. No woman of her people would ever make such a vow, not to him, not in this world. "Why would you do this?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Clara's throat tightened. She couldn't fully explain it. This pull between them, this certainty that fate had drawn her to him. Perhaps it was compassion. Perhaps it was rebellion against a town that had never truly claimed her. Or perhaps it was something deeper, something the desert itself had whispered into her heart. "Because it's right." she said softly. Because you shouldn't vanish.
Because I...
She hesitated, her cheeks warming. Because I want to. Kai closed his eyes, his chest rising and falling as if her words struck something sacred in him. He shook his head slightly as though resisting hope. Yet when he opened his eyes again, there was a light there, a fragile flame rekindled. In that moment, the vow was made. Clara, the rancher's daughter, had promised her body, her future, her reputation, for a man the world called an enemy. It was reckless. It was dangerous. But it was also pure, born of a courage few would ever understand. The desert outside stretched vast and unforgiving. But within the walls of that cave, something new had taken root. A bond that neither law nor prejudice could sever. And though Clara could not yet know the trials to come, she had set into motion a story that would bind her life to Kai's forever. The desert had always been Kai's teacher. It was harsh but honest, offering no mercy, no lies. The land gave only what you earned with sweat, patience, and respect. As he recovered under Clara's careful tending, Kai thought often of that truth. He had seen many things stripped away, land, kin, hope, but never had he imagined that the desert would send him a woman like her. Each day she came with food hidden beneath a blanket, and each day she checked his wounds with quiet determination. The bullets had grazed bone, torn muscle, but thanks to her steady hands and stubborn care, infection had not taken him. At first he had tried to keep his distance, answering her questions with curt words. He distrusted kindness. Too often it came with strings. But Clara was relentless in her honesty. She did not pity him, nor did she act as though he were beneath her. She listened when he spoke, and when she looked at him, she did not see an Apache or an enemy. She saw only a man. The night she vowed to carry his child had left him restless. For days her words echoed in his mind like the call of a canyon wind. I will carry your child. He did not understand her fully. Her world was different from his. Her people had never known what it meant to be hunted for who they were. And yet he could not deny the power of her vow. It was not said lightly. He had seen the fire in her eyes when she spoke. One evening, as the moon rose over the desert, he asked her, "Do you know what it means, the vow you made?" Clara sat across from him, a small fire flickering between them. She had her sketchbook in her lap, where she often drew the outlines of rock formations or desert flowers. She closed it, meeting his gaze. "It means I'll carry your child. It means your family's blood won't end with you." Kai's jaw tightened. "It means more than that. Among my people, life is sacred. To promise life is to promise everything. It is not a gift to be given and forgotten." "I didn't say it to forget it," she replied firmly. "I meant it." Her stubbornness made his lips twitch in the faintest ghost of a smile. This woman, pale as desert lilies yet fierce as a hawk, was unlike any he had known. Still, he could not let her bear the weight of such a vow without answering it in kind. That night, Kai prepared for what he must do. Though far from his homeland, he still carried with him the teachings of his grandfather, who had been a keeper of stories and ceremonies. He asked Clara to sit with him in silence as he built a small fire outside the cave. The desert wind whispered low, carrying the scent of sage and dust. "What are you doing?" she asked, curiosity and wariness mingling in her tone. "Giving you what you have given me," he answered. "You offered me your future. I must offer you my soul." Clara blinked, startled. "Your soul?" Kai nodded solemnly. "Among my people, words bind the spirit. A vow is not only breath, it is life itself. If you carry my child, then I must carry you through this world and the next. What I am, what I have, it belongs to you." She hesitated, unsure. Raised in a Christian household, she had been taught that a soul belonged only to God. Yet as she watched Kai kneel before the fire, his expression calm and reverent, she felt a gravity that silenced her doubts. This was not superstition. It was devotion, deeper than anything she had ever known. Kai spoke in his language, words rolling low and rhythmic, a chant that seemed to blend with the crackle of fire. He lifted a small pouch from around his neck, made of deerskin worn with years. From it, he scattered pinches of dried herbs and tobacco into the flames. The smoke rose upward, curling like a serpent toward the stars. When he finished, he turned to her. "I have given my spirit to the fire, to the wind, to the night sky. They are witnesses. Now I give it to you." Clara's throat tightened. "Why would you do that for me?" "Because you are no longer only yourself," he said. His gaze was steady, unflinching. "You carry my future. I cannot let you stand alone. If you take on my blood, you take on my soul. It is yours now until I draw my last breath and beyond. Clara had never heard such words from any man. The suitors in town, men like Henry Barstow, spoke of land, of cattle, of wealth. Their offers of marriage were bargains cold and transactional. But here, in the middle of the desert, a man the world called her enemy had offered her something greater than land or money. He had offered her his soul. Her eyes stung with tears she refused to shed. "Then I accept," she whispered. He reached out, his hand trembling not from weakness but from reverence. She placed her hand in his, feeling the calluses of a rancher, the strength of a survivor. For a long moment they stayed that way, the fire warming their faces, the stars bright above them. That night Clara could not sleep. She lay awake in the cave, staring at the ceiling of rock, listening to Kai's steady breathing nearby. The weight of what they had done pressed upon her, not as a burden but as something vast and eternal. She had tied her life to his, not in secret dalliance or fleeting passion, but in a promise sanctified by earth and sky. Yet with that vow came fear. She knew her people would never understand. The town already whispered about her, and if they discovered she had bound herself to an Apache, they would cast her out. Worse still, Kai's own people might see her as an intruder, a threat. The thought of what lay ahead frightened her. But when she glanced at Kai in the faint moonlight, she felt steadied. His words lingered. "If you take on my blood, you take on my soul." For the first time in her life, Clara felt chosen, not as property, not as a prize, but as a partner in something greater than herself. The sacred exchange was complete. She had vowed life. He had vowed his soul. Between them, a bond had been forged that no law, no church sermon, no prejudice could break. It was more than love, more than desire. It was destiny, sealed in fire and silence, and though neither could yet see it, that vow would carry them into battles far greater than bullets or prejudice. It would shape the lives of everyone around them and carve a mark on the land itself. The days stretched into weeks, and summer's heat pressed down on the desert like a furnace. Kai's wounds slowly knit under Clara's care, though scars remained where the bullets had torn through flesh. By the end of August, he was able to stand, to ride, to work again. Yet his strength was not the only thing that had returned. In those stolen hours with Clara, something more fragile had taken root. Love. They never spoke of it directly, not at first. Instead, it lived in small moments. The way Clara's hand lingered a heartbeat longer when she checked his bandages. The way Kai's gaze softened when he watched her sketching wildflowers in her notebook. The way their silences stretched comfortable and full like the hush before dawn. But both knew the truth. They were bound by more than vows. Desire simmered beneath the surface, tempered by fear and sharpened by the knowledge that the world would not forgive them if it discovered what they shared. Back in town, Clara felt the weight of watching eyes. The townsfolk had long whispered about her independence, but now the gossip grew sharper. Her frequent rides into the desert, her solitary habits, people began to ask questions. Women at church nudged one another when she entered. Men muttered over whiskey that she was up to something. Henry Barstow, the wealthy rancher who had set his sights on her, noticed most of all. He had offered for her hand more than once, and each time she had turned him down. His pride could stomach rejection, but her mysterious absences gnawed at him. A woman refusing him was insult enough. The idea that she might be secretly meeting another man was intolerable. Clara's father, weary and aged by years of failed harvests and cattle theft, tried to warn her. "Clara, people are talking. They say you ride too far, stay out too late. It ain't proper." She met his eyes, her jaw set. "Since when have I ever been proper?" Her father sighed. He loved her, but he feared for her. On the frontier, a woman's reputation was as fragile as spun glass. Once cracked, it could never be mended. Clara knew it too, but her resolve was unshaken. She had made a vow, and she would not abandon it to appease gossip. If Clara's world grew colder, Kai's was no warmer. When he returned to his people, those few families who still clung to scraps of land, the change in him did not go unnoticed. His cousin, Mateo, watched him closely. "You've been gone for weeks," Mateo said one evening as they mended fences together, "and now you return with strange looks in your eyes. What happened out there?" Kai deflected, but rumors spread quickly. His people were wary of settlers, and for good reason. They had been betrayed too many times. Promises broken, treaties ignored, families slaughtered. When whispers began that Kai had been seen with a white woman, suspicion sharpened into hostility. "You shame us," an elder woman told him one night. "While our blood fades, you give your heart to the enemy. Do you not remember what they've taken from us?" Kai listened in silence, but the words cut deep. His people's anger was born of wounds older than he was, scars that time had never healed. To them, Clara represented danger, betrayal, erasure. Yet when he thought of her, he did not see an enemy. He saw the woman who had saved his life, the woman who had given herself to his future. Despite the mounting suspicion, Clara and Kai continued to meet. Sometimes in the cave where he had healed, sometimes by the creek under the cottonwoods, sometimes in the shelter of night beneath a sky thick with stars. Every meeting was a risk, yet every meeting deepened their bond. Clara began to notice changes in herself too. Her body grew restless, her heart raced when she thought of him. Sometimes, in moments of quiet, her hand strayed to her stomach, wondering if her vow had already begun to take root within her. One evening, as they sat by the creek, she confessed her fear. "If they find out, they'll drive me out of town. Maybe worse." Kai's hand covered hers, warm and steady. "And my people will turn from me. But we knew this when we made our vows. We do not walk an easy road." She leaned into him, the sound of the water rushing over stones mingling with the steady beat of his heart. For a moment, the world's hatred felt far away, silenced by the vastness of the desert night. It was in those shadows, in those stolen hours, that their love became more than a pact of survival. It became a defiance, a quiet rebellion against the chains of prejudice that sought to bind them. But love in the shadows came with a cost. Clara's absences grew harder to hide, and her father grew more suspicious. When he asked her directly one evening where she went during her long rides, she could not answer truthfully. The lie that left her lips tasted bitter, but she spoke it anyway. Kai too felt the weight of secrecy. His cousin's eyes followed him, sharp with suspicion. Trust within his people began to fray, and Kai feared that one wrong word would expose everything. Worse still, both knew that their secret could not be hidden forever. Clara's vow would soon show itself in her body, and when it did, the truth would burst forth like a storm, impossible to contain. Yet even under this shadow, their bond only grew. One night, as the full moon bathed the desert in silver light, they shared their first kiss, a slow, tentative joining of lips that carried with it all the unspoken promises of their hearts. For Clara, it was unlike anything she had known. Not the forced touch of greedy suitors, but the gentle reverence of a man who had given her his soul. For Kai, it was a moment of wonder, a reminder that even in a world filled with cruelty, beauty still bloomed. When they parted, breathless, Clara whispered, "Whatever comes, I don't regret this." Kai touched his forehead to hers. "Nor do I. Even if the world turns against us, I will not let go." The flame of their love burned brighter, even as the darkness gathered around them. They were bound not only by desire but by vows spoken beneath fire and stars, and though danger pressed closer with each passing day, neither would surrender. For in the shadows they had found something worth risking everything for. The desert had a way of keeping secrets, silent mesas, shadowed canyons, endless horizons that seemed to swallow truth whole. But people were not like the desert. They whispered, they gossiped, they pried until secrets came spilling into the open. Clara and Kai had lived in the fragile shelter of silence for weeks, maybe months, but the first cracks were beginning to show. Henry Barstow was not a man used to being denied. With a sprawling ranch, dozens of hired hands, and more cattle than anyone else in the valley, he walked through town with the swagger of a king. For months he had courted Clara Whitmore, dangling promises of wealth and security before her father. Each time, Clara refused him, politely at first, then firmly, then with icy silence. At first, Henry dismissed her refusals as girlish stubbornness. But when whispers began circulating, that Clara rode alone into the desert, that she stayed gone for hours, sometimes until dusk, Henry's pride turned to suspicion. He began to watch her, asking questions in town, prodding neighbors with casual remarks. One evening, he followed her. From a distance, he trailed her horse across the scrubland, keeping low where the mesquite grew thick. Clara rode with purpose, her back straight, her bonnet tied tight against the wind. She did not meander as one gathering herbs. She rode as one headed toward someone. Henry's gut soured as he followed. By the time he caught sight of her dismounting near a creek, he was already seething. And when he saw the figure who emerged from the trees, Kai, tall, bronze-skinned, Unmistakably Apache, rage boiled in his chest. The woman he wanted, the land he sought defiled by a savage. Henry did not confront them then. No, he was too cunning for that. Instead, he returned to town and let his anger ferment into poison. At the saloon, he leaned close to men nursing whiskey and whispered of what he'd seen. Out there by the creek with one of them, not just meeting, loving him, the story spread like wildfire. Some dismissed it as Barstow's jealousy, but others nodded knowingly. Clara had always been odd, riding too far, speaking her mind too freely. And hadn't her mother been strange too? A woman who didn't quite fit in? By Sunday service, Clara could feel the change. People shifted in the pews when she walked by. Women clutched their children closer. Men gave her father pitying, scornful looks. The sermon that day was not subtle. The preacher thundered of purity, of keeping one's blood untainted, of the dangers of temptation. Clara's cheeks burned as the congregation murmured assent. When she returned home, her father confronted her. His hands shook as he spoke, his voice hoarse. "Clara, tell me it isn't true. Tell me you're not keeping company with—" He couldn't even finish the word. Clara met his gaze, torn between love for her father and loyalty to Kai. At last, she said quietly, "I made a vow. Pa, I won't break it." Her father crumpled into his chair, covering his face. "They'll ruin you," he whispered. "They'll ruin us both." Kai faced no kinder fate among his own. His cousin Mateo confronted him openly one night, fury in his eyes. "You bring shame to us." Mateo spat. "You lie with her while our people starve? You think she will save you? She will only betray you, as they always do." Kai stood firm, though inside his chest war raged. "She saved my life. She carries my future. That is no betrayal." Mateo's voice broke with bitterness. "Then you are lost." The rift widened. Some among Kai's people turned their backs on him. Others muttered of casting him out. He had tied himself to a settler, and in their eyes that was a stain too dark to wash clean. Still, Kai held to his vow. Each night he met Clara in secret, even as the circle of suspicion tightened. And in those moments when she leaned against his chest, when her laughter softened the weight on his shoulders, he believed the struggle was worth it. But Henry Barstow was not content with whispers. His pride demanded action. He began gathering men, ranch hands loyal to his pay, neighbors swayed by fear, drifters eager for violence. He framed it as a matter of community safety. "That Apache's been sneaking around too long," he told them, his voice hard. "Stealing cattle, corrupting our women. You've seen it with your own eyes. Whitmore's girl carrying his brat. If we don't act, who's next? Your daughter? Your sister?" Fear twisted into rage. Men who might have hesitated were roused by his words. By the time Barstow was done, he had a small mob ready to follow him. Clara learned of the danger one evening when a neighbor's wife, pity softening her voice, warned her. "They're coming, Clara." Barstow's riled him up. "He means to find your Apache and kill him." The blood drained from Clara's face. That night she rode hard into the desert, finding Kai near their creek. Breathless, she told him everything. "They'll come for you," she said, gripping his hands. "They'll kill you, Kai. You have to run." But Kai shook his head. "I will not run. If I flee, they will only chase me farther. And they will not stop with me. They will punish you too. I cannot leave you to face them alone." Tears stung her eyes. "Then what do we do?" Kai's jaw set grim and determined. "We stand. Together." Clara felt fear grip her, cold and sharp. But beneath it burned something stronger, fury. Fury at a world that told her who she could love, who she could be. Fury at men like Barstow who treated her as property. Fury at the hate that shadowed every step of their love. She lifted her chin, her voice steady. "Then we fight." It came 2 nights later. The mob rode under a half-moon, rifles glinting, horses snorting clouds into the cool air. Barstow led them, his eyes fever-bright. They found Kai's camp near the edge of a canyon. But they had not expected Clara. She stood at his side, rifle in her hands, her skirts whipping in the wind. Gasps rippled through the mob. Barstow's face twisted with rage. "You filthy whore," he spat. "Stand aside." "He dies tonight." Clara raised the rifle, her hand steady. "You'll have to shoot me first." For a heartbeat, silence hung between them. Then chaos erupted, gunfire cracked. Horses reared. Kai fought like a man possessed, his rifle firing, then his knife flashing in the melee. Clara, heart hammering, fired into the night, her shots finding their marks. Men fell. The mob wavered. Barstow lunged forward, his revolver aimed at Kai's chest. Clara screamed and shoved Kai aside, the shot grazing her arm. Pain seared, but she did not falter. With the butt of her rifle, she struck Barstow hard, sending him sprawling into the dust. The fight raged until at last the mob broke, men scattering into the darkness, their courage spent. Barstow lay groaning in the dirt, his pride shattered more than his body. When the gunfire faded, Clara sank to her knees, trembling, blood soaking her sleeve. Kai knelt beside her, his hands gentle as he pressed cloth to her wound. Their eyes met, exhaustion and terror mingling with fierce relief. "You saved me," he whispered. "You saved me first," she answered. They both knew it was not over. The town would not forget. His people would not forgive. But in that moment, kneeling in the dust with smoke still hanging in the air, they felt unbreakable. For they had faced the world's hate and stood together. And though the price was heavy, their love had not shattered. The days after the ambush passed in a haze of pain and determination. Clara's wound healed slowly, the scar a reminder of the night she had chosen love over safety, vow over reputation. The town simmered with anger, some furious at Barstow for failing to deliver justice, others scandalized that a woman of their own had stood shoulder to shoulder with an Apache warrior. Whispers followed her everywhere, but Clara no longer bowed her head. She had faced their hatred and survived. Shame had no hold on her. Kai was no less burdened. Among his people, word of the fight spread swiftly. Some called him reckless for dragging trouble to their doorstep. Others cursed him for laying his heart in the hands of a white woman. Yet there were those who watched him differently now. He had fought not just for his life, but for his vow, for the future he and Clara had forged. A few of the younger men, weary of despair, began to see in him a defiance worth admiring. Life settled into a fragile rhythm. By autumn, the desert cooled and Clara's body began to change. Her hand often drifted to her stomach, the swell undeniable now. At night, when Kai laid his hand there, they both felt the flutter of new life, a heartbeat that carried the promise of two worlds within it. But with the child came new dangers. The town grew bolder in its cruelty. Women crossed the street rather than brush against her. Men muttered slurs as she passed. Even her father, who had tried to defend her once, withdrew into silence, unable to bear the weight of her choices. She loved him still, but she no longer sought his approval. She had chosen her path, and it was too late to turn back. One evening, as the wind carried the scent of mesquite through the air, Clara and Kai sat together outside his small homestead. She leaned against him, her hands folded over the swell of her belly. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked softly. Kai looked out at the horizon where the sun bled into gold and crimson. "Regret? No, fear, yes. The world will not be kind to our child. They will call him names, see him as less. But regret? Never. He will carry both our strengths. He will know that his life came from love, not hate." Clara smiled faintly, tears pricking her eyes. "Then whatever comes, it will be worth it." The months ahead were not easy. Supplies grew scarce as the town refused to sell to her. Some nights they heard riders in the distance. Gunshots echoing across the desert meant as warnings. But Clara and Kai endured, leaning on one another. When the birth came on a stormy spring night, Clara fought through hours of pain, her cries mingling with the rumble of thunder. At last, with Kai's hand steadying her and the midwife whispering encouragement, a wail filled the small cabin, a son. He was tiny, his skin carrying the warmth of the desert sun, his eyes dark and alert even in his first hours. Clara wept as she cradled him, exhaustion and joy flooding through her. Kai bent low, his lips brushing the child's forehead. "My soul," he whispered, "here is where it lives now." The child's birth did not silence the world outside. If anything, it gave their enemies new fuel. Barstow, his pride scarred as deeply as his body, spat venom whenever the boy's name was mentioned. The preacher thundered from his pulpit of abominations and sins. Yet no threat, no curse, no sermon could diminish the fierce love that filled their home. In time, the storm around them softened. Some of the townsfolk grew tired of hating, weary of chasing shadows. Among Kai's people, the boy became a symbol, not of betrayal but of survival. A child born of two worlds yet belonging fully to neither, he carried the hope that perhaps the future need not mirror the past. Clara and Kai knew the road ahead would never be free of hardship. Their love would always be tested. Their son would always face questions of belonging. but they had built something the world could not take away. A family forged not of convenience or custom, but of defiance, sacrifice, and unwavering devotion. On quiet evenings, when the desert was painted silver by the moon, Clara would watch Kai carry their son in his arms, pointing to the stars and telling him the old stories of his people. Later, she would add her own tales, of books, of dreams, of a mother who had once vowed to carry a child not for herself, but for love. And as the boy drifted to sleep between them, Clara would reach for Kai's hand, their fingers twining together. The vow she had spoken felt no longer like a burden, but like a gift. She had carried his child, yes, but he had carried her too, through fire and hatred, through doubt and danger, into a life they had built with their own hands. Together, they had defied the world. And together, they would teach their son that love, once chosen, was stronger than fear, stronger than hate, strong enough to bind two souls across the widest divides. For in the desert, under endless skies, a vow had been kept, and a family had been born.